Maybe this is the final video for the day. Maybe. Let's see. In this video, we'll talk about raising 5 girls. It was easier when they're younger. Let me explain. As they were younger, when you have this fertile soil that hasn't been hardened yet by the complexities of life, you can plant seeds, a number of seeds over and over and over. And those seeds end up being the foundational principles that they'll grow up with in life. All of us have them. And we have gotten influenced by our parents and by grandparents, friends, family, but mainly the parents are the ones that are planting the seeds initially for this fertile soil, this ground that's walking around. And they just soak it in. They're sponges as they're younger. And life is funny. And it takes two, male and female, mom and dad, to raise the kid. And let me explain what I'm talking about here. In order to have this balance, if you have 2 women raising a kid, I think there's an imbalance, because the male and female balance each other out. At least they should balance each other out. The women they're going to be more nurturing. The guy is going to be more hands-off. Even happens. That's just the way we are. It's not bad. It's just different, but it has a certain balance. And I'll be talking about balance later on, because balance is extremely important. But if the mom and dad can make it work and they continue to grow and they're planting seeds, while the child's, as you may already know, while the child is younger, the nurturing aspect of things is going to be there. And the dad can also provide nurturing as far as doing things for the kid, but we're more hands-off. When I say more hands-off, it's not a lot of coddling, not a lot of cuddling, even though we do hold them, especially when they're younger. But as they grow up, we get really excited about having them learn certain skill sets and applying those skill sets. So we get hands-off, because we planted these seeds while they're younger. And we're like, okay, let's see how they do. Tell my girls how to ride a bike, how to swim, how to drive, all of them, right? And if you ever see a mom and dad trying to teach a kid how to swim, it's vastly, 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 vastly different. Because we know what can happen is very synonymous to the world. You can get drowned in the world, and the mom wants to pick up the kid. But their dads, we're like, okay, let them sink in the world for a little bit, and then we'll pick them up when they need to be picked up. If they can't make it work, we'll pick them up at that point in time. So I'm saying all that to say this, that there's a vast difference, but there's a balance that can be established. And while you're planting these seeds and you're watering these seeds over the years, they grow up, right? They grow up to be adults like us. And if they have lived a good childhood, they'll grow up and they'll be responsible into the workplace environment, into society. And that's our job, right? It's our plight. Then most of the guys were like, okay. All right, time to push the birdie out of the nest, see if they can fly. The mom's like, no, not yet. Another story there. But one thing I had to share with my girls is that when you were born, right when you came out of your mom, there was no handbook that came out specifically for you. There is no handbook for child number 1, handbook for child number 2. Just you came out the sack you're in. Umbilical cord, whatever, right? All that good stuff. Then what? You do your best. Parents, we do our best in order to raise kids. Things, foundational principles that we've learned, things that we've learned throughout the years as we're growing up, blah, 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 blah. And then input this information into this child, just taking those skill sets, transferring them over to the child. And wisdom, insight, whatever, knowledge. And you rinse and repeat for every child that you have. But again, there is no handbook. There's no way that, this is how to raise this child. There are people that try to have written a book on child rearing and principle based. Some of them are. Battery dies, I change it. So some are experience based, all good, and that's cool. But there is no certain handbook for any particular one person that ever comes out that's right behind the child when it comes out. Promise you. I haven't seen it. So one thing I learned though, or many lessons, I'll share some of them, but I have noticed that as they grow up, so you're planting these seeds, and then they grow up, and then you're gonna have this fight later on because of external experiences. Now this is par for the course. Nothing you can do about it. Because one, they have to find themselves and find their identity, who they are, and be comfortable with that. And sometimes, and even more so now, 2023, about to be 2024, as I'm making this video, it is tough for younger people to find out who they are nowadays. Especially now with the influx of social media. So you have these external forces that you're trying to have this good come into this person here, this external forces that aren't all that good that they're in front of consistently. Nothing you can do about it. From the movies, social media, you see how, and they portray under the auspice of independent and understanding who you are and equality and everything else, the child becomes has a contentious attitude towards the parent. Then the child thinks that they don't know, that the parent doesn't know what the child is going through. Sounds familiar? For those of you who are older, you have kids, yeah, and you were a kid, of course you were, then you may understand that. I went through the same thing. Not as bad, because there was no disrespect or anything like that towards my mom and my dad. There were some contentious moments that we had, of course, but then it all ironed out, but there was no disrespect. There's some things I didn't like to do, and chores, all these other things that just par for the course, because we like life on easy mode, human nature, but it doesn't work out that way in order to learn certain skill sets. But it's worse now that social media is such a presence in society, and the movies, and you see the kids again, their parents slamming doors, just smiling like blah, 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 all this other kind of stuff. Crazy stuff. Especially here in the West. There are still some cultures that are much more respectful, but here in the West, it ain't happening. Not like that. So as a parent, I've learned that I have to let go of certain things, and hopefully the seeds that I planted, the foundational principles I've planted, will resurface later on, and then they will come to the parent, myself, their mom. You know what, you're right, I'm sorry, I didn't understand, blah, 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 blah. I see some semblance of it happening now with my older, when we had a talk the other day. But some of the younger ones, not so. And trust me, they're all different. You can apply the same principles, raise the same house, everything else, and they're all different. They're going to accept things differently and blah, 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 whatever else. It's tougher as they get older. But you have to let them go through that, and you also have to plant the seed of, hopefully they'll learn what accountability is. Because accountability is the only thing that's going to balance out the contention that happens. Because what the child doesn't know is that they are completely wrong in a myriad of respects. They don't know that yet, though. But once they learn accountability, what will happen is the pendulum will hopefully swing to the other side once they understand what accountability is, because then they'll take ownership of some of the actions and behaviors that they have had in the past directed toward you as the parent, or me as the parent as well. Not a moment sooner. You can't force it. Don't try to force it for the sake of the relationship, future state relationship. Don't try to force it. So for me, for even some of them, I've just kind of backed off. Because I understand what they don't understand 10 steps ahead. I'll explain how my mindset later on. It's complex, but I like it, love it. But help me be your strategist. So I think of things 10 steps ahead. And there are myriad of things that they don't understand. And they didn't, I know I had the conversation, and 2 of them so far have asked and come to ask the question that I knew they would ask me about their mom and my divorce and split, and me getting them and raising them. But it only happens when they get older. I knew I'd have the conversation, but back then when I made the decision, I had to let it happen back then, even though it hurt me, and I had to wait years for them to say, hey, Dad, we'll come live with you. It's phase 1. Then I had to wait years for them to say, hey, can we have a talk? And I have to wait years for them, because none of them had kids now, and they don't understand the 3rd phase until they have kids. I have to wait years. Years. So it's going to try, as a parent, it's going to try your patience. It's going to try your patience to the nth degree. Just maintain calm, keep busy with other things. I mean, there are things you can do. But it will not happen a moment sooner. And when they understand accountability, then things will start to normalize and change. Then you can actually have a better relationship. Not all kids will go through that. In the West here, majority of them will. Guaranteed. I bet on it. I'll bet my life. I'll bet my right arm. I'll bet my left arm. Whatever. I'll bet you anything. Can't help it. Too many external forces that they have available to them. And now they're infiltrating the schools and everything else, and this and that. I mean, there's this, society is quite different, but at the same time, it's not as difficult as it was when we were younger. And they think that we lived a much more simple life. Psh, please. One of my daughters came to me one time and said, if you had sons, would you raise them differently? I said, yes. She was like, whoa, really? Why? Good question, honey. Really good question. I love that question. Because whether you believe it or not, whether you want to accept it or not, boys and girls are different. In fact, for boys, it's damn near a necessity for them to be their life to be more complex and go through some of the hardships. Bullying, competition sports, fights, because we have to grow up to be the protectors and providers. No matter what people say, that's still our role, as it has been. People say, oh, it's changing, society's changing. All right, we'll see. Well, yeah, all right, I'll bet that too. It's going to swing back. So guys have to have, in my mind, guys have to have it differently. I was raised up in a rough neighborhood, had some fights, had to learn how to fight, started martial arts when I was 15 years old, and had to understand how to compete, had to understand how to keep my mouth shut, understand how to walk a tight rope, understand, I say tight rope, just a straight and narrow. All these things I had to understand as a guy. I'm not saying women don't have to understand that, but they live a different life than guys. It is. It just is. Okay, anybody say, it just is. And most of my friends who I've grown up with will agree to that. And most people I meet, guys, will agree that even though we're raised up in different societies, different cultures, different areas of the frickin' planet, I've had these conversations, these intimate, deep conversations with them, and we all say the same thing. Despite how egalitarian we try to make our society now. Conversation for another time. I explained some things to her. We had a good conversation. Sat out back, had a cigar, chatted her, yep, I'd raise them differently. Here's why. Boop, 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 boop. And in fact, so one of my daughters just moved out, 22. She's 22, she's 22 this month. She just moved out when she was 21. I moved out when I was 18. Went to college, straight to the dorms. Then from that point on, after 2 years in dorms, went to townhouse, and got that with some of my boys, and then from there, another house, and got married, everything else. Totally different. Massively different. And you don't understand what can cause trauma and what could be fragile. Guys, we don't have an opportunity to be fragile. From my perspective, we don't have an opportunity to be fragile. And fragile means that we break down, lose our frame, lose our cool, lose our stoicism, and then fly off the handle, start shooting up schools and all this other kind of bullshit. We don't have an opportunity to do that. Well, it happens though. But somewhere down the line, something got broken here, mentally broken. And this is where mental toughness, which is hardly ever spoken about now and hardly ever instituted or hardly ever even taught. I try to teach my girls mental toughness. I start pulling back. When I start instituting, I start pulling back because I saw that it was vastly different. And I'm not saying that girls can't, because I have a friend, she's a gymnast. She said when they were going through that, they brought in a mental toughness coach and blah, 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 blah. Mental toughness is for anybody, but it takes a certain kind of, now I taught it to the boys, the guys, that even through martial arts, utilize certain tools in order to do that. And sometimes I've noticed it's just not, it's received from girls differently. My experience, some girls can, again, and do. I'm just saying my experience, my anecdotal experience. It didn't come with a handbook. And raising girls was easy, became quite a bit more complex. It was easy while they're young. They grow up, you start recognizing the patterns of how they think. And for me, what I do for a profession, I have to understand how people think. So I do understand how people think. And then when I shared with them at one point in time, I know you better know yourself, but mentally wise. They were like, no, no. And I was like, yeah. I remember I think my mom or my dad, one of them told me that too. And I was like, but they were right. They were 100% right. They knew me better than I knew myself. I couldn't even answer the question who I was. It took me 3 weeks to answer that when I was in my 20s. So did they know me better than that? Yeah, because they knew what I was capable of, my patterns and things that I just did. Well, same thing with your kid. You may recognize and find some of those things out too. And you grow up with them, and you planted seeds in them. So you end up knowing them better than they know themselves. They can't understand that though. It doesn't compute in their head. Doesn't compute. Don't even try to explain it. You say it, then just keep going. Don't try to explain it. They'll headbutt against it and be contentious. Well, as I said earlier, par for the course. Nothing you can do about it. Too many external stimuli that has infiltrated their mindset and thinking that negates and razes, R-A-Z-E, destroys some of the things that you put into their head that you know they're going to need. They may revive the seed later on. May. I'm seeing some semblance of it here and there. But there's nothing you can do about it here in the West. If you got social media, they access to all these other things and videos, things that we allow them to do. And guess what? They have to go through it. They have to go through it. They have to learn it for themselves. And as a dad, because we can be hands off, and I had explained to them before as well, I give you the skill set, I got to pull back so I can see if you learned the skill set, the concept that I taught you, and if you're continuing to utilize it in the right way. I observe from afar, and then I will make corrections near later on if I see that you're not utilizing it properly. They don't understand that either. So what do? You let them find out who they are. And I'll leave it with this. My mom used to tell me. She would say, son, sometimes experience is the best teacher. Let that catch up. Experience is the best teacher. It may hurt them, and it may cause even some trauma to them, but experience sometimes is the best teacher. I'll leave you with that. Bye.